I never thought I'd be the kind of person to destroy someone's life completely. But here I am, sitting in my brand new penthouse apartment, looking down at the street where my former family is probably wondering how they ended up with nothing. And you know what? I don't feel sorry for them, not even a little bit. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how the people who called me a burden learned exactly what losing everything really feels like. If you've ever been made to feel worthless by the people who were supposed to love you, stick around, because this one's for you. Growing up, I was what you'd call the black sheep of the Johnson family, while my older brother Michael was the golden child, the star quarterback, the one who could do no wrong. I was just ... there. The accident, the mistake, the burden. They never let me forget. I was ... My parents, Linda and Robert Johnson, made it crystal clear from the day I could understand words that I wasn't planned. We had our perfect family with Michael, my mother would say during her wine-fueled rant sessions. Then you came along and ruined everything. She'd laugh like it was some kind of joke, but the venom in her eyes told a different story. My father wasn't much better. He'd look at me with this expression of pure disappointment, like I was some kind of cosmic mistake he couldn't figure out how to fix. You cost us our dreams, Sarah. He'd tell me when I'd ask why we couldn't afford things. My friends had. Michael's college fund had to become your baby fund. Michael's future had to be shared with someone who was never supposed to exist. Can you imagine hearing that as a 7-year-old, as a 10-year-old, as a teenager trying to figure out where you fit in the world? Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, because I know I'm not alone in this. Michael, my perfect older brother, was no better. He learned from our parents that I was lesser, and he treated me accordingly. While he got the latest video games, the name-brand clothes, the car for his 16th birthday, I got hand-me-downs and lectures about being grateful for what I had. Sarah's lucky we'd keep her around. He'd tell his friends when they'd come over. Most families would have given up a long time ago. The worst part wasn't even the daily reminders that I was unwanted. It was the way they'd used my existence as an excuse for everything that went wrong in their lives. Couldn't afford a bigger house. Sarah's fault. Couldn't take that vacation to Europe. Sarah's fault. Marriage problems. Well, those started when Sarah came along and ruined everything. I learned to be small, to be quiet, to take up as little space as possible. I figured if I could just be invisible enough, maybe they'd forget how much they resented me. I threw myself into my studies, not because anyone encouraged me, but because books were the only place I felt like I mattered. In stories, the underdog sometimes wins. In real life, the underdog usually just gets kicked harder. High school was its own special kind of hell. While Michael was getting recruited by colleges for football, getting praised at every family gathering, being held up as the shining example of what the Johnson family could produce, I was working part-time at a grocery store just to buy my own school supplies. My parents made it clear that their financial support was reserved for their real child. "We can't afford to send 2 kids to college," my father announced at dinner one night during my junior year. "Michael's got a bright future ahead of him. Sarah ... Well, Sarah can figure something else out." He said it so casually, like he was talking about the weather, not destroying his daughter's dreams. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I realized that if I was going to be treated like I didn't belong in this family, then I'd find a way to truly not need them. I started planning my escape, not just from their house, but from their entire world. I applied for every scholarship I could find, wrote essays about overcoming adversity that were so raw and honest they made admissions counselors cry, and somehow managed to get a full ride to a prestigious university 3 states away. When I told my family, their reaction was exactly what I expected. "Don't get too excited," my mother said, barely looking up from her magazine. "Colleges give out scholarships to feel good about themselves. You'll probably flunk out in the first semester. Just don't come crying to us when you can't hack it," Michael added, as if he hadn't needed our parents to pay for everything his entire life. But my father's response was the one that really stayed with me. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Good. Maybe now, you'll finally understand what it's like to be truly on your own. Lord knows we've done more than enough for you." I left for college the day after graduation with 2 suitcases and $17 in my pocket. I didn't have a going-away party. I didn't have tearful goodbyes. I had my mother reminding me not to let the door hit me on the way out, and my father telling me not to bother calling if I needed money because there wouldn't be any. College was hard, But it was also the first time in my life I felt like I could breathe. I was surrounded by people who didn't know I was supposed to be a burden. I could just be Sarah, not the accident or the mistake or the reason everything went wrong. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that surprised even me. I majored in business and economics, not because I was passionate about it, but because I knew it was the fastest route to financial independence. I wanted to make sure I'd never have to depend on anyone ever again. I worked 3 part-time jobs, slept 4 hours a night, and maintained a 4.0 GPA because failure wasn't an option. During my sophomore year, something interesting happened. I was working at a local coffee shop near campus when I overheard 2 graduate students talking about cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. This was back in 2011, when Bitcoin was still this weird internet thing that most people thought was a scam or a fad. But something about the conversation intrigued me. I started researching, reading everything I could find about digital currencies and decentralized finance. While everyone else was focused on traditional business models, I saw something different. I saw the future. I used my meager savings to buy a few Bitcoins when they were trading for around $50 each. My roommate thought I was crazy. "You're literally throwing money away," she told me. "That fake internet money is never going to be worth anything." But I had a feeling. Maybe it was because I'd spent my whole life being told I was worthless that I recognized value where others saw waste. Maybe it was because I understood what it felt like to be dismissed and overlooked. Whatever it was, I kept buying every coin I could afford. By my senior year, my small investment had grown into something substantial. Not life-changing money yet, but enough to make me realize I was on to something big. I started a blog about cryptocurrency, began teaching myself about trading and market analysis, and even started a small investment club on campus. Graduation came and went without any family in attendance. I walked across that stage completely alone, but for the first time in my life, I felt proud of myself. I had done something they said I couldn't do. I had succeeded without their help, without their support, without their approval. I moved to San Francisco after graduation, living in a tiny studio apartment and working for a tech startup during the day while building my cryptocurrency portfolio at night. The city was expensive, the work was demanding, but I was finally living life on my own terms. Years passed. I rarely talked to my family, and when I did, it was brief and superficial. They'd ask how I was doing. I'd say fine, and that was about it. They never visited. They never invited me home for holidays. It was like I had never existed, which, honestly, was exactly what I had wanted. But then something incredible happened. It was 2017, and cryptocurrency was having its first major boom. Bitcoin hit $20,000, and suddenly my little blog had turned into a major financial platform. My investments had grown beyond my wildest dreams. I wasn't just comfortable anymore. I was wealthy. Really, truly wealthy. I quit my job and started my own investment firm, specializing in digital assets and emerging technologies. Within 2 years, I had offices in 3 cities and was managing portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I was featured on financial news programs, invited to speak at conferences, and recognized as one of the top young entrepreneurs in the country. And through it all, my family had no idea. I bought a penthouse apartment in Manhattan, a beach house in Malibu, and a cabin in Aspen. I traveled the world, met incredible people, and built a life that was everything I had dreamed of and more. But there was still this hollow feeling inside me, this unresolved anger that I couldn't shake. Then in late 2019, I got a phone call that changed everything. "Sarah," the voice was shaky, uncertain. It was my mother. "Hi, Mom." I hadn't heard from her in over a year. "We need to talk to you about something important. Could you come home? It's about your father." My first instinct was to hang up. These people had made it clear I wasn't family, so why should I care about their problems? But curiosity got the better of me. "What's wrong with Dad?" "He's sick, Sarah, really sick. And we might lose the house." It turned out that my father had been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer that required expensive treatments not covered by insurance. They had already mortgaged the house twice, maxed out their credit cards, and burned through Michael's college fund that they had been so protective of. "We don't have anyone else to turn to," my mother said, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "Michael's struggling with his own family. He can't help us. We thought maybe, maybe you could." She was asking me for money. The same woman who had called me a burden my entire life was now asking me to save her. I didn't say yes right away. I told her I'd think about it and call her back. But instead of thinking about whether to help them, I started thinking about something else entirely. I started thinking about justice.c. I had learned something important during my years in finance. Information is power. And I had spent considerable time and money building a network of people who could find out anything about anyone. It took me less than a week to get a complete picture of my family's financial situation. And what I found was even worse than they had told me. My father owed money to almost everyone. The house was 3 months behind on payments. Their credit cards were maxed out. Michael's wife had left him because of his gambling problem, and he was living in a studio apartment across town, barely making ends meet as a substitute teacher. But here's the interesting part. The house I had grown up in, where I was reminded daily that I was unwanted, was worth almost $800,000. It was in a neighborhood that had gentrified significantly since I'd left home. That house represented their entire net worth, and I realized I could own it. I called my mother back a week later. "I've been thinking about your situation," I told her. "I want to help." I could hear the relief in her voice. "Oh, Sarah, thank you. I knew you wouldn't abandon family when we really needed you." Family, that's what she called it now, that she needed something from me. "I'll pay off the mortgage and all of Dad's medical bills," I continued. "But I have conditions. Anything. We'll agree to anything. I want them to sign the deed of the house over to me. I'll let them live there rent-free while Dad gets treatment, but the house will be mine. Think of it as collateral for the loan." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Sarah, this house is all we have. It's our retirement, our security, ... Mom, you're about to lose it anyway. This way, you get to keep living there. Dad gets his treatment, and I get some security that my money isn't just disappearing into a black hole." It's a generous offer, and it was generous, in a way. I was offering to pay off over $400,000 in debt in exchange for a house worth $800,000. They'd still come out ahead, but I knew something they didn't know. I knew about the development plans for their neighborhood. I knew that the city was planning to rezone the entire area for commercial use. I knew that their little street was about to become extremely valuable to developers. They agreed to my terms. I flew home for the first time in years, watching my father struggle with his treatments, seeing my mother's face as she realized how much her daughter had changed. I wasn't the scared, small girl who had left their house anymore. I was confident, successful, and completely in control of the situation. "You've done well for yourself," my father said one afternoon as I sat by his hospital bed. "We're proud of you." Proud. They were proud now that I was useful to them. I hired the best oncologist I could find, made sure my father got the treatment he needed, and watched as his health slowly improved. I paid off every debt they had, gave them a credit card with a generous limit for living expenses, and made sure they had everything they needed. And then I waited. Michael tried to reconnect with me during this time. "Sarah, I know we weren't the best family to you growing up," he said one day when he came to visit, "but seeing you step up like this, seeing how successful you've become, it makes me realize how wrong we were about you. Too little, too late." Michael. 6 months later, my father was in remission. The doctors said his prognosis was excellent. My parents were talking about the future again, making plans, discussing how grateful they were that they hadn't lost everything. That's when I made my move. I showed up at the house one morning with a moving truck and an eviction notice. "What is this?" my mother asked, looking at the papers in confusion. "You're being evicted," I explained calmly. "This is my house now, remember, and I've decided I want to live in it." "But we had an agreement. You said we could stay here." "I said you could stay here rent-free while Dad was getting treatment. Dad's treatment is finished. Now I want my house back." The look on their faces was something I'll never forget. It was the same look I must have had countless times as a child, when they'd pull the rug out from under me, when they'd remind me that nothing I had was really mine, that everything could be taken away at any moment. "You can't do this," my father said, his voice shaking. "This is our home. We raised our family here." "No, Dad, you raised one child here. You made it very clear that I was never really part of this family. I was just a burden you had to carry." Had been recording the conversation, just like I recorded everything now. Insurance, you might say. "Sarah, please," my mother begged. "We're sorry. We're sorry about how we treated you. We were wrong, but you can't leave us homeless. We're your parents. Parents, I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to my own ears. Parents don't call their children burdens. Parents don't make their children feel unwanted every single day. Parents don't abandon their children emotionally and financially the moment they turn 18. I handed them the eviction notice. You have 30 days. I suggest you start looking for somewhere else to live. Michael showed up that evening, furious. How can you do this to them? He demanded. Their old Sarah dad just finished cancer treatment. Where are they supposed to go? I don't know, Michael. Where was I supposed to go when I was 18 and they cut me off completely? Where was I supposed to go when I was working 3 jobs just to afford textbooks? Where was I supposed to go when I walked across that graduation stage with no family there to support me? That was different. No, it wasn't different. It was exactly the same. The only difference is that now I have the power and they don't. He tried to guilt me, tried to appeal to my sense of family loyalty, tried to make me feel like the bad guy. But I had spent too many years being made to feel guilty for existing to fall for that trick again. You want to help them? I asked him. You're their golden child. You figure it out. But Michael couldn't figure it out. He was barely keeping his own life together after his divorce and his gambling problems. He couldn't take them in, couldn't support them financially, couldn't do anything except call me names and tell me I was heartless. The 30 days passed quickly. I spent that time renovating the house, updating it with modern fixtures and appliances, turning it into the kind of home I had always wished I could have grown up in. Every room held memories of being made to feel small, and I was erasing those memories, one improvement at a time. My parents found a small apartment across town, something they could barely afford on their Social Security and my father's disability payments. Michael moved in with them, 3 adults crowded into a 2-bedroom space that was a far cry from the comfortable suburban home. They had known, but I wasn't done yet. Remember when I mentioned that I had information about the neighborhood development plans? Well, it turned out that the city needed to acquire several properties in the area for their redevelopment project, and they were willing to pay handsomely for them. I sold the house to the city for $2.3 million, more than triple what it had been worth when I took ownership. The entire neighborhood was going to be turned into a commercial district, which meant even if my parents had kept the house, they would have been forced to sell anyway. But here's the thing about government acquisitions: they pay fair market value to property owners, but they don't pay anything to people who are just renting. My parents, if they had still owned the house, would have walked away with enough money to buy a nice place somewhere else and live comfortably for the rest of their lives. Instead, they got nothing, just an eviction notice from the city and 30 days to find somewhere else to live. That's when my mother called me, crying, "Sarah, they're taking our apartment building too. The whole neighborhood is being torn down. We don't have anywhere to go." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I genuinely was sorry. Sorry that it had taken this long for them to understand what it felt like to have nowhere to turn. "Please, we're begging you. We'll do anything. We'll get on our knees and apologize for everything we ever did to you. Just please don't let us end up on the street." And you know what? They did apologize. For the first time in my life, my parents admitted that they had been wrong. They acknowledged the pain they had caused me, the damage they had done to my self-worth, the years of emotional abuse disguised as parenting. But it was too late for apologies. "I appreciate you saying that," I told my mother. "I really do. But an apology doesn't erase 30 years of being treated like garbage. An apology doesn't give me back my childhood or my sense of self-worth or the relationship I should have had with my family." "So what do you want from us?" she asked. "I don't want anything from you. That's the point. I used to want your love, your approval, your acceptance. I used to dream that someday you'd realize I was worth something, but I don't need that anymore. I've built a life without you, and it's a better life than I ever could have had with you in it." They ended up moving to a low-income housing complex in a different state, closer to my mother's sister, who agreed to help them get back on their feet. Michael followed them there, still struggling with his own demons, still trying to figure out how his perfect life had fallen apart so completely, and me. I used the money from the house sale to expand my business even further. I now own properties in 12 different states, manage investment portfolios worth over $1 billion, and employ more than 200 people. I've been featured on the cover of Forbes, invited to speak at Harvard Business School, and recognized as one of the most influential young entrepreneurs in America. But none of that success means as much to me as the moment I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. If you're someone who's been made to feel worthless by your family, let me tell you something. Their opinion of you says nothing about your actual worth. The people who are supposed to love you unconditionally sometimes can't see past their own limitations and insecurities. Sometimes the best thing you can do is prove them wrong by living well without them. I know some of you watching this might think I went too far, that I should have been the bigger person, that I should have forgiven them and moved on. And maybe you're right. Maybe I am the villain in this story. But I spent 30 years being told I was a burden, and I decided to show them what losing a burden actually feels like. Did I feel guilty about it? Sometimes. Did I lose sleep over it? Occasionally. But did I regret it? Not for a single moment. Because here's what I learned. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who taught you exactly what you're capable of when you stop trying to earn their love and start focusing on earning your own respect. My parents called me a burden, so I made them homeless. It sounds harsh when you put it that way, but the truth is, I simply gave them the same energy they had given me my entire life. I treated them exactly as well as they had treated me. And honestly, it felt like justice. The last time I spoke to my mother was about 6 months ago. She called to tell me that my father had passed away. The cancer had come back, more aggressive this time, and their limited insurance hadn't covered the treatment he needed. "I thought you should know," she said, her voice small and tired. "I'm sorry for your loss," I replied, and I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish death on the man. "He regretted how he treated you," she continued. "Near the end, he talked about you a lot, about how he wished he could take back all the things he said, all the ways he made you feel unwanted." "I'm sure he did," I said. "People often regret their choices when they're facing the consequences of those choices." There was silence for a long moment. "Do you ever think about forgiving us?" she asked finally. "I think about it," I admitted. "But forgiveness is something you earn, and it's something you ask for while you still have time to make amends. You can't emotionally abuse someone for 30 years and then expect forgiveness on your deathbed." She hung up after that, and I haven't heard from her since. Do I feel guilty about not helping my father in his final illness? Sometimes. Do I wonder if I could have been the bigger person? Of course. But then I remember being 7 years old and being told I was a mistake. Being 16 and having to work to buy my own school supplies while my brother got everything handed to him. Being 18 and being told not to bother calling home if I needed help. I remember all of that. And I remind myself that I didn't create this situation. I just refused to continue accepting the consequences of their choices. They taught me that love is conditional, that worth is earned, and that family is just a word that doesn't guarantee anything. So I used those lessons to build a life where I didn't need their conditional love, where I had earned my own worth, and where I had chosen my own family. And if that makes me the villain in their story, I can live with that, because in my story, I'm the hero who refused to stay small, who refused to accept being unwanted, who refused to carry the burden of other people's emotional failures. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing what happens when someone who's been pushed down decides to stand up and push back. If you're dealing with family members who make you feel worthless, know that you have options. You don't have to accept being treated poorly just because you share DNA with someone. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. And if you're someone who's been dismissive or cruel to a family member because you think they're not important enough to matter, remember this story. Remember that the person you're overlooking today might be the person you need tomorrow. But most importantly, remember that everyone deserves to be treated with basic human dignity, especially by the people who claim to love them. I'm Sarah Johnson, and this is my story of how I turned being called a burden into becoming someone who could carry the weight of her own success. Thanks for watching, and remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. Until next time, remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's inability to see it.